Good morning or good afternoon, everybody, wherever you are in the country. We have quite a few people jumping on still. I'm going to give it just a few more moments as everybody starts coming in. It's really nice to see some familiar names on this joining in. So we're going to give it just a couple more minutes and then we'll get started. Again, for those of you just jumping on, thank you for being here. We've got people rolling in every moment, so I'm going to give it just a couple more minutes to get started. Thank you for joining and being patient. Really looking forward to being with you today. Well, it looks like quite a few of the folks who've registered are on. So we'll begin. My name is Ryan Soave. For those of you who I don't know, I have been the Associate Clinical Director for All Points North Lodge and the Program Director of our Coaching and Workshop Program. I am now the newly named Clinical Director of our currently launching telehealth intensive outpatient and outpatient programs that we've had to ramp up since the crisis that's been going on. So I'm really grateful to be here with you all today. I see a lot of familiar names from around the country. Thank you for taking the time to be here. The title of this webinar is Seeking Serenity in the Chaos. And we're just going to talk about a few different things, especially as professionals in this field, that we can really, take advantage of in this time to be our best selves and support our clients and families the best that we can. I'm going to talk about some things that we can do personally, professionally, also talking about how to transition a business to a telehealth platform, a practice to a telehealth platform with some tips and tools there. I've been doing that for some time, for several years in various manners. So I've got quite a bit of experience with that and just going to help with some of maybe the logistics of it, but also kind of some of the ways of thinking that might need to be innovative in order to transition, because it sometimes isn't just as simple as, moving to the computer, as some of you probably have seen. And throughout this, we're also going to do a few different kind of micro meditations, so brief meditations. We're going to start with one in just a moment. Again, just thank you for being here. At the end, we're going to have a community discussion where you can raise your hand on your computer. Or your phone, there's a place where you can raise your hand. You can ask a question, share something about what's going on. The intent of this is to give you some material, but more than that, we really just want to create community. And community, I think now is as important or more important than it has been in my lifetime. So Again, thank you for being here. And we're going to start with uh, a, a, a brief meditation. So, wherever you are, if you're driving, please don't close your eyes, but wherever you are, just um, sit as comfortably as you can. Maybe with your spine straight, imagining the top of your head pointing up at the ceiling. That just simply gives a little more alignment in your spinal column where your central nervous system is held, and can help that energy in there flow a little bit better. Maybe place both feet on the floor, drop your shoulders a bit, let your hands fall onto the sides of your chair, maybe in your lap, palms down, palms up, whatever's comfortable for you. And then close your eyes. And if you're not completely comfortable closing your eyes, just allow your gaze to go toward the floor and let it go a little bit out of focus. And begin to slowly deepen your inhale and lengthen your exhale. Closing the gaps between the inhale and the exhale, so that eventually you're just breathing one continuous breath. Letting your body relax as you breathe. And bringing your awareness and your perception to the soles of your feet and all 10 toes. And as you breathe in, allowing your feet and toes to relax. And then allowing your ankles, calves, and knees to relax. And with your next breath, bringing your awareness to your thighs and hips and buttocks. Just allowing that area of your body to relax. And allowing your hips and pelvis to relax. Just letting it settle, your body settle wherever you're sitting or standing. And then begin breathing into your lower back and abdomen, allowing that area to relax. And then to your chest and upper back. Bringing your awareness to your shoulders, allowing them to relax, allowing them to drop down, and then drop down a little more. And allowing your upper arms and your lower arms to simply relax. And bringing your awareness to your wrists, hands, and fingers. Maybe slightly wiggling your fingers and allowing that area of your body to open up and relax. And then bringing your awareness to your neck and throat, the back of your head, the top of your head. Just imagining that area completely opening and relaxing. And then bringing your awareness to your face. Letting all expression drop from your face. Letting your face completely relax. And letting that relaxation spread throughout your whole body. Letting gravity completely take you as you sit and breathe and relax. And on your next breath in, breathe in deeply and hold it at the top just gently. And then let it go with a soft sigh. And again, breathing in deeply, holding it at the top. And letting it go with a sigh. And then very gently, just begin to open your eyes slowly, letting them orient to whatever's around you as they choose. Maybe the floor, the walls, the windows, something that's outside. Maybe looking down at your own hands and body. Allowing yourself to come back to presence. Relax. Thank you for participating in that. Hopefully it's a little bit relaxing. If you'd like, you can type a word or two of what you're experiencing now in the chat box or question and answer box at the bottom. Please feel free to do that or ask questions at any time. Let us know what you're experiencing right now. And that brings me to what we're experiencing in the world right now. Before I dive into the slides that I have to share with you in the presentation, so much in our field in the past decade, we've begun to talk about trauma and understand it in a different way and what we're experiencing in our bodies as we do. And I'd like you to even notice what you're experiencing in your body as I talk about this, because we're experiencing a global trauma. And I know that doesn't seem like a stretch for most of us in this field, but it's not always looked at like that. Lots of times, we can see where there's a lot of illness and death, and people will notice that as trauma, and all the workers who are working in the hospitals and all that's going on. But there is what we call a global high intensity trauma going on all the time. Even if it's not at the height of an emotional experience, it's like, even if the fire is not all the way up, it's like our burner is always on, even on a low simmer. And we're bombarded with information. We're bombarded with perceptions. We're bombarded with, real and perceived fears. And, it's impactful. It's impactful, as I'm sure for ourselves, for those around us, for our families, for our children. And, we're in the middle of it. And I believe we're experiencing some of this now, but even as we move out of it, we're going to need a lot of support as a global community. More than ever, our roles as helping professionals are going to be needed. Because remember, PTSD is post-traumatic. It's after the trauma. We're in the middle of it right now. And there's a lot that we can do and be to support. But after the fact, this is going to have impact for a long time. This is something that my father-in-law is almost 90, and he's never experienced anything like this. My children, our 12-year-old, doesn't really realize that this has never happened in the way that it's happening globally. So there's a lot that we're experiencing. And I really believe, and I know a lot of you already know this in the call, but I just can't, on the webinar, but I just can't stress it enough that we look at this as a trauma that we're experiencing currently. And there's not only the effects that we're having now, but what we're going to have afterwards. And so we need to prepare ourselves as professionals for that. You know, there's a lot of, when we look at the diagnosis of PTSD, you know, it says when we're faced with actual or threatened death or injury. In the DSM-4, it said real or perceived. And right now, there's a lot of actual and threatened. There's a lot of real and perceived, right? It's real that this illness is going on, that the virus is out there and it's spreading. And it's real that people are dying, and it's real that we're on lockdown in many areas. But then there's also perceived fears, like, what does this mean right now? You know, it doesn't, you know, I can only do so much to prepare my family and take care of them and take care of each other. And if I'm sitting there at night when I'm not sick, just being worried about what's going to happen when I get sick, it's a perceived fear for that moment that's bringing on a stress that doesn't allow me to participate with my family or protect them or be with them in a way that, you know, I really want. And then that translates into how I am as a professional. You know, if any of you, well, I see a lot of the names on here that I know are amazing professionals in the field, and I'm sure your work hasn't all been furloughed. In fact, we're probably, if you're like me, you're getting bombarded with calls for what to do and what to do with children and what to do with ourselves. So I think it's important to name it, you know, that we're experiencing this global high intensity trauma. And even when maybe we're not individually, like not in fear, it's all around us. And it's going to be present in interactions and in relationships and in how we do business for now and for some time to come. So that's I'm gonna take us into some of the slides that I have for you today. First, we're just gonna talk about, you know, what to do in our personal lives. You know, this translates to our professional lives and what to do with our families. And a lot of this, many of you have seen. I just want to stress it. You know, first we want to identify what are the things that we can control and what are the things we can't control. This is something that I use to work with people all the time. Now it's a little bit more magnified because on a daily basis, when the world is quote unquote normal, there's so many things we can't control. And right now it's really in our face. But I've got to identify what are the things I can't control and what are the things I can. You know, I can't control what's happening with the virus. I can't control what the politicians are doing other than voting. I can't control what is happening with hospital beds. You know, what can I control? I can follow the directions that my community gives me, right? I can maintain a schedule for myself. I'm in control of waking up at, you know, at the same time each day, you know, walking outside and getting sunlight, eating at regular times. You know, these are things, you know, when we look in the addiction recovery world, oftentimes we'll hear that very simple slogan called HALT, H-A-L-T, hungry, angry, lonely, tired. And it seems like such a very basic, simple practice, and it is, but it's meant to help people stay, you know, if they eat at regular times, they maintain their blood sugar and they don't drop into states of stress in their body that, you know, move them to that what we might call hangry state where you're not really present if you're really hungry. You know, watching for anger, watching for resentment, watching for, you know, turning on the news and getting angry at one party or the other, or what someone's doing or not doing. You know, lonely. You know, we are meant to kind of in our biology to connect. And right now we're kind of being forced to not connect in the usual way. So finding a way to connect, you know, we use that in addiction recovery because it helps people, you know, when they're not hungry, when they're not angry, when they're connected and not lonely, they tend to make better decisions. They're not in their own head, right? And then tired, you know, sleep is one of the number one pillars of health. And when we're tired and exhausted, it's actually been proven that our cognitive ability drops. It drops by 30 to 60% after we don't sleep for one night or another. And if we, and then a second in a row, and if we don't sleep, on regular times for 5 or 6 nights in a row, it can have a similar effect. That's why we see pilots have to sleep for so many hours before they can fly, or, they do that in other professions too. But, we talk about that a lot in addiction recovery to keep people kind of on the beam, so they're not in extremes making decisions that are based on their kind of feelings that might be driving them that are imbalanced. And that can be used right now, to maintain some semblance of order in the middle of this chaos. I work with a neuroscientist at Stanford University, Andrew Huberman. You can follow him on Instagram at Huberman Lab. He's had a lot of daily posts in the past just about neuroscience and taking care of the brain and what sleep and the impact is. But he and I talk a lot about, just maintaining the schedule for our brains outside of this period of time, or especially, I travel a lot and used to do a lot of international travel. And he would tell me, make sure I wake up at the same time, no matter what time zone I'm in, and walk outside and get sunlight in my eyes and eat at regular times. It actually helps set the circadian clocks that exist in our body and help us maintain some sort of order so we don't drop into extreme emotional states. And if that's going to work when I'm traveling from, here to, a time zone halfway across the country, it works really well right now. And it's something that we can control, watching our diet, not beating up on yourself for eating more right now because we're around the house or whatever, and maybe not worry about, that I've got to eat this certain way, but making sure that we're getting something in our bodies that's nutritious and supportive of us. And rather than worrying about eliminating stuff, really just, make sure we're adding some of the things that are beneficial. And getting some sort of exercise and movement that moves stress through our body. It moves the energy through our bodies in a way that it doesn't get stuck in there. Our emotional responses that are reactive come under periods of stress. And what stress is, as many of you know, is it's just excess energy that's trapped in our bodies, and we need to get it moved. We might not be able to move it in the same way. Right now I'm thankful we just rescued a dog, and we're under a lockdown that we can't leave the house unless we're doing that or some, grocery shopping or whatever. And I'm walking the dog a lot, and it might not be the intense workout that I normally enjoy, but it's giving me it's moving that energy through my body, and we want to make sure we do that. You might not be able to get down and do a yoga class like you normally would, but do like a full one, do 10 minutes of something. Sometimes being on lockdown in the house, if you're with your kids and stuff, we have to think about things differently. And these are things that you can give your clients too. I can speak for myself and many of the people that I've worked with, their jobs are changing and the schedule's changing. If you're at home a lot more, if you have kids or your spouse or your partner, it's not as easy as me leaving the house and coming back at the end of the day. And so finding time to connect with my family and connect with others on phone calls and things, where I might take the time that I would use to drive to the office and instead use that as a time to, we live in South Florida in the middle of the day, which I hadn't thought of doing in a few years. I'd jump in the pool with my wife and kids, and make sure that we're getting a little bit of connection and some kind of islands of freedom in the middle of the day. And then this is something else that, that I give to clients and you can utilize and you can utilize with the people in your lives, is if you're someone who really worries or you want to watch the news and think, schedule a time to do that. Even schedule a time to worry. If there's things that you want to think through and plan, and if your brain is wired in a way that you need to kind of worry, set a time for it. So, at 5 o'clock today for 30 minutes, I'm going to let my brain run. I'm going to let it go. I'm going to write stuff down and I'm going to go. And then after that, I'm going to take some time to plan. And, how are you going to get your news? You might, for me, I'm someone who's greatly impacted by that. I have been since I was a little kid, really impacted by the news. And when I have it on in the background, this is for me personally, it has an impact. And shutting it off right now isn't beneficial for me because I need some of it. So it's about finding pockets. I'm gonna read about it at this point. I'm not gonna do it as soon as I wake up in the morning because that sets my day in a certain way. I'm gonna find a time that works for me that I can get the news that I need, and then maybe have a little bit of time after that to kind of think about it, worry about it, let my brain run, let that all, and eventually let it go. These are things that we can do to identify what we cannot control, which is most of it, and identify the things that we can control. And they don't have to be these things that I just mentioned, but things like this, and then take action on them. We as human beings and our brains and our bodies do well with some sort of rigor and order. For those of you who have kids, that they do better in school when they just behave better when they eat at regular times and get sleep. We're the same as adults. If we can do our best to maintain some sort of order like that, it'll help us be better in the middle of the chaos. And then we take that to professional life. I think I've been talking to a lot of different therapists about this, and we're called upon to be beacons, to be support, to be steady, with our clients, often with our families. And the reality is we're experiencing this trauma too. We're in the foxhole with them. And now more than any time, I think it's important to acknowledge our own fears and uncertainties. You don't have to acknowledge them to your clients, although you may, but it's really important for us to acknowledge it and have time to spend with it, to care for it ourselves, acknowledge those fears. And one that's come up quite a bit is the fear of loss of income. And several of the therapists I've talked to almost didn't want to acknowledge that. Most of us got in the field to be of help. Many of us have been able to make good livings doing it, but with all the names I see on here and the fact that you're on this call in the middle of the day, for yourself, tells me that, there's a group of people on here, a community that got in here in this field. They're on here because we want to know how we can be our best to help others. And we don't often want to also acknowledge that people pay for our services. And there's a fear there of loss of income, just like anybody else. Now, we may be able to there might be more of a call for mental health right now, but there can be a fear here. I've heard of therapists dropping their rates just proactively, like significantly, like from $250 to $80 an hour, because being maybe afraid that people are going to let them go. And this isn't the case for everybody, but I think it's something really important to acknowledge that happens, and this brings us to coming from abundance versus scarcity. And abundance means there's enough, it's not that abundance doesn't mean that I'm going to have everything I need. Abundance means that I'm choosing based on what's best, and that I'm going to move through this in a way as if things are going to work out, rather than choosing from scarcity, like running and trying to grab onto something and choosing out of fear. Acknowledging that we have this fear, acknowledging that there may be the way that we may have to change things, but then choosing from what would be the abundant way of thinking moving down this path, and that can really model something for our clients, for our families, not just dropping rates or taking on clients or doing as much as we can because we're scrambling, because we're worried about certain things, but doing what's best for ourselves and our families, which might mean at times changing how we do our business. Maybe during this time with kids at home, taking on a little bit less, really focusing our energies where we can, and then providing maximum value for our clients. I'm going to talk about this in a minute, but about how to to move towards telehealth and how you think about your practice. or practices, but, you know, we might want to rethink the needs of our clients in this time. Maybe they don't need an hour once a week. Maybe they need a half an hour twice a week. Maybe they need 3 20 minutes. Maybe they need 3 30 minutes. And with working from home and on the computer, it might be able to change from that. Maybe they need a group of people that you can pull together. Maybe there's some other need that they need that's different than what we're going, and providing them maximum value. You know, letting them know that if there, you know, is a hardship, you can work with them, but supporting them through this, right? Sometimes the immediate, I mean, I did this myself. One of my immediate thoughts was, you know, I have my own therapist. She's pretty expensive. And one of my thoughts was, I'll let that go. That's one of the expenses I can let go. And the reality is I need that more right now than I did 6 weeks ago. And when we can support our clients in seeing that and helping them get through it, it can really support them and our practices in the long run. You know, seek out collaborative partnerships. You know, some people aren't good at or haven't been historically good at doing things on the computer or moving their information to being digital or things like that, right? You know, this might be a time to find somebody that does. I've partnered with a friend of mine who does these personal development online digital courses, and she's supporting me in doing something. I've actually wanted to do this for a long time, and now it's giving me the opportunity here to, out of necessity, to put some of that on so that I can, you know, have a broader reach. And I can actually have a broader reach for people without them having as much of a financial investment in it. And that's not what everybody needs to do, but I'm not skilled enough to do this. I was able to go to her and say, you know, I want to partner with this. And maybe, you know, partnering for groups that you're going to do, or, you know, working with a family, or, you know, other, and these collaborative partnerships aren't just about building a practice. It's also about staying connected, you know, in this period of time, and building a community. You know, another thing is determine your schedule, you know, and I have both of these here: determining your schedule and maintaining boundaries. You know, right now it might be easier for clients to reach out. They're in panic, they're in all of that kind of thing. You know, don't be afraid. You know, if they're in a real emergency, they need to, you know, call emergency services. You know, really don't be afraid in this time to say, you know, let's wait for our session, or let's schedule a session. And maybe because you're at home and they don't come in the office, you should schedule a 30-minute session. You know, maintain these boundaries. You have to, you know, as professionals, we have to maintain our energy. You know, I just heard something on the news about a lot of the healthcare workers in New York City, and saying how emotionally drained they are, more than physically tired or anything else, emotionally tired. And that's going to start happening more and more for us as we start dealing with some of the fallout of this that's going to happen as we go along. But determine your schedule. You know, determine the time that you're going to be working and you're not working. You know, this is a period where we could always feel like we're on, and if we're always on and available, that just adds to the stress that's going on and doesn't make room for you to be creative and release, you know, and productive in your own lives, and, you know, finding peace yourself. So determine your schedule, and it might be different now. It might be that you work for, you know, 4 hours from home, and then take a 2-hour break, and then take some calls in the evening, or get on. Now you can rethink how you're doing things, because the office has moved from maybe your office to a screen or a telephone. And now is a time to double down on supervision and support. You know, if you're someone that has a supervisor, don't get rid of that right now. My opinion, my suggestion, you're going to do what you choose, but this is a time that we can really use that. You know, maybe creating support groups of other professionals, whatever area of the field you work in, even if they work for another company, right? Talking about, you know, how we can support each other, how we can be collaborative, how you can create community. You know, like I said, this is going to be something that's going on longer for us as mental health professionals, because that generally lags behind the immediate physical danger. There's people that are in survival mode because they need to, and after they're going to run on that for a while, we're really going to be needed. Not that we're not needed now, but that's going to happen. And lastly on this slide is create a field of resonance. And what I mean by that is take care of yourself. The more that you can still, the more that you can, be serene, the more that you can practice self-care, others will sense it. Your children will sense it, your partners will sense it, and your clients will sense it. And that field of resonance can be more impactful than any piece of knowledge we have, any strategy we have. That sometimes just being there, being that witness, in a way that allows the person to totally let go and surrender, is more impactful than the greatest piece of advice you could ever give. And that takes practice in ourselves and self-care. So that brings us to restructuring your business. If you're somebody, and maybe not everybody on this webinar does, but we're all impacted in a way. I mean, people can't come into offices. There's residential treatment that's taking some. A lot of the intensive outpatient programs have been, kind of disbanded because people can't come, and they've got to find ways to work with each other. You can't really have people come into your office as much, or they wouldn't anyway if you're in an area that they still can. So there is an impact for everybody. And if you're somebody that's transitioning to telehealth, I know that some of you have been doing this for some time. It's not always as simple, like I said, as just you're moving from the computer to, your office to a computer. But first, I'd like to say, really look at the platform that you're going to use. Okay, whether, let's say, we're using Zoom right now. What I see this Zoom meeting as is it's an extension of you being in the conference room at All Points North Lodge. This is a doorway, right? This meeting ID, that link that you clicked, is a doorway into an extension of our building. And when you set it up for yourself, that it is an extension of your office. That's another way for them to come into you. And when you can approach it like that, there can actually be a more impactful relationship. I've been on this for quite some time. I work with clients nationally, and I have clients all over the world, from Australia to different parts of Europe, and I've had them in Asia, that I've done a lot of work like this. And once I've kind of built a relationship, I've even been able to do, experiential work with many of them, when they're appropriate, and once I've developed that. So I'm not saying start that right away. You have to find your way. But I've had people have experiences in this where it's almost like the computer screen disappeared, and it was very similar to us being face-to-face. And having had people had breakthroughs in the way that they've had in intensive programs and workshops. That may not be for everybody, but it can work. It takes some practice. It takes some getting used to. So practice it. Get used to it. Have conversations with your friends, with your spouse, even in the house. Set it up. Get to know your platform. Find one first. You can use Zoom. You can use Skype. You can use the phone. There are many of the billing softwares like Simple Practice or other things like that have a telehealth component to it. Find one that you're going to use and practice it. Because the more that you can be able to manage it, the easier it's going to be to develop that relationship there. And acknowledge the difference with your clients, right? But it becomes, once we can get through that, acknowledging, you can express and they can experience this almost the same unconditional positive regard over the computer screen as they would in your office. Familiarize yourself with the law and licensure regulation modifications. One good place to look is the Medicare and Medicaid guidelines, just to get an idea. You may have received emails or look at some things. Each state seems to have some announcements up. There's also many of the, billing software, many of the other software platforms are having webinars that can kind of talk to you about the what's possible. Currently they've relaxed a lot of the regulations across state lines. There's even certain things with that, that some payers are looking at where you don't even have to have a written consent. Again, find this out for yourself based on your license in your state, but you can have a verbal consent as long as it's noted, right? They're really relaxing this so that we can support people. So, make sure that you familiarize yourself like this. And yeah, and Jay just said, look out for provider bulletins as well. The providers are putting out things that they're really trying to make it easier, I think, in general, for us to be of a support. Okay. Also, and that goes to the insurance benefits. A lot of insurance companies are paying for telehealth. So if you're someone who takes insurance, you help your clients look into this, because a lot of them have already been doing it, and now they're relaxing some of their guidelines. I touched on this before. Think outside the box. Change up session times. Change the way you work. They're not necessarily coming to your office anymore. If you're at home or in a home office, or you're just turning on the computer, I've had clients for a while that I've had on that we worked for a bit, and now we're on 30 minutes a week or 30 minutes twice a week, right? I set up subscriptions with them where I'm charging them by the month, and then we have a 30-minute session a week, and then I'm available during certain hours via text and email. I let them know that I might not be able to get back to them right away, but I will get back to them. And if it is something that taking more time, we need to schedule another session. But there's ways to think about that. And right now, it might be hard for people to have an hour-long session at home when they're also doing homeschooling with their kids. So maybe find ways that can support them. Maybe 2 30-minute sessions or even 2 20-minute sessions might be more helpful for somebody, because now they can kind of let some stuff go on Tuesday and on Friday. Think outside the box. They might end up paying the same amount, and they get more touches, and it feels to them like it's creating more value, and maybe you're sending out information to them in the middle. So really think outside the box with that, with what your fee structure is, how you do it. Also let people know that, if they're saying they want to not come in anymore, or they don't want to do this and it's because of finances, work with them then. I wouldn't suggest necessarily going out and just making a blanket statement that you've dropped rates for everybody. Some people, that doesn't impact them. And if you drop yours significantly to a rate that doesn't support you, it's also not supporting your clients, right? It might be depleting you or having you be more worried. As an example, I've been running some breathwork groups on virtually, and I've been doing it with some groups of men that I've worked with for a long time. For them, I said, it was X amount of dollars for the session. If they can pay it, I trust that they're going to pay it. And if they can't, they're going to pay less. And if they can't pay any, they won't. So it's almost like a donation for a group. I'm not suggesting doing that one-on-one, but there's ways, because there are some people that are going to be severely impacted by this, and we want to find ways to support them. And there are people who, even though they may be impacted, the hourly rate is not as much of an impact for them. And I'm sure some of you have those clients. So really just start thinking about that. And then think about groups. Right now might be a time where you can, take, if you're working, for me, that group of men that I was working with for a breathwork group, I'm taking them and having them meet on their own. Or if you have a group of women, or even if it's a mixed group, and then you suggest that they use a Zoom meeting to meet together, that's not costing me anything for them to meet, yet it's providing them a benefit that also doesn't cost them anything, and it enhances the therapeutic experience. And now is a time that they can probably do that more easily, because people are getting used to being online. Okay. I want to move through this, and then we'll get to a little bit of discussion before the end. So some tools for you and your clients. Movement. We talked about this. Movement doesn't have to be an hour-and-a-half yoga class. It can be 10 minutes. It can be 5 minutes of stretching. It can be walking. It can be going for a jog. We have a Peloton. It could be getting on that. right? There's all kinds of things that are available online, but make sure that even if it's not outside, that the body's moving. Breath. Breath is the most important thing that we do each day. We can go for weeks and months without food. We can go for days or weeks without water. We can only go for a few minutes without breath. And our breath drives our nervous system. One of my teachers always says, if you want to change your mind, change your breath. You know, if you're really angry or anxious or frustrated or afraid, chances are you're not breathing really slow. Chances are you're not taking full, deep breaths. You know, there's a breath pattern for every kind of emotional and mental state that we have. Not like 1, 2, 1, 2, but you know, if you're afraid, generally we're breathing in a certain way. If we're activated into a survival state or fight or flight, we're breathing in a way that's trying to get the system kind of ramped up. You know, and when we're in that perceived fear that's creating stress, there's a part of our brain that's going, I'm at threat. I'm in danger. And you're going into survival mode. And it activates the parts of your body that go into that, you know, fight, flight, or even freeze. Now, if you take a slow, deep breath in, like in through the nose, which I'll show you in just a minute, and then out through your mouth, like you're breathing out of a straw, that is not a breath pattern that you would need in a survival state. It actually sends a signal to your brain that says, I'm safe. Because if you're able to breathe like that, you're not in immediate physical danger. It actually activates the parasympathetic nervous system, which is rest and digest, versus the sympathetic nervous system, which is fight or flight. It sends a signal to that says, it's okay to relax. So pay attention to your breath. You know, I'll get into a couple micro meditations for breathing in a moment. Take walks, you know, if you can. Right now, we might not be able to walk much further out of your yard, but I saw a guy in France who did a marathon on his porch. You know, maybe walk around the yard. Down here, we can walk a few hundred feet from our house with the dog, you know, but make sure that you can use that as a meditation. You can use that as a time to relax. You know, kind of EMDR was discovered through, you know, the founder of Going for Long Walks. So, you know, naps might not be the easiest thing, but find a time to take a 20 or 30-minute nap. The more you can rest, the more that the body can process, you know, sympathetic stress energy. And that brings me to Yoga Nidra. Yoga Nidra is a sleep-based meditation. Pam just put a thing in the chest that said she did a Yoga Nidra last night to relax her for sleep. And the first time ever she slept through her alarm and didn't wake up for an hour and a half afterwards. Now, I know Pam, she goes 1,000,000 miles an hour. If that worked right there, you know, try it. It's something I've been relying on heavily right now. Yoga Nidra. Yoga, it's sleep. Nidra means sleep. And so it's yogic sleep. There are some recordings out there. They're 25 to 35 minutes. We believe that about a half hour of that is equal to about 3 hours of REM sleep, not to substitute for sleep, but to give you the rest, the same amount of rest in your body. If you go to Amrit Yoga, AMRIT, Yoga Institute YouTube channel, there are a whole bunch of free, they're a nonprofit teaching, nonprofit foundation teaching and certifying teachers of yoga and Yoga Nidra. They've got a ton of free Yoga Nidra practices from many different teachers. It's a really powerful practice. There was a study in a Danish study in 1990 or 2001, I believe, that showed in that specific type of meditation, there was an increase in a 65% increase in the release of endogenous dopamine in the brain during Yoga Nidra meditation, which is a significant hit that really supports people in relaxing, resting, and recharging. You know, the more that we can rest and relax, the more that our body can do what it needs to do to return to homeostasis, which is out of stress. In fact, emergency room surgeons or ICU doctors will say when they don't know what to do with somebody anymore, they've done as much as they can, sometimes they'll induce a coma. Well, what's a coma? It's a completely relaxed state, no stress, with hopes that the body can do what it automatically knows how to do. So try Yoga Nidra. Amrit Yoga Institute YouTube channel. I'm going to put it in the chat box. Try them out. Micro meditation. Sometimes it's hard to find 25, 30 minutes in the day. Find 2 minutes. There's a breath on here called the Shitali breath. It's this simple. Breathe in through your nose and then exhale slowly as if you're breathing through a straw. So do this with me. It's like this. In through the nose and then out through the straw. Again. Let the exhale be longer than the inhale. And as you do this one more time, just notice how quickly the body begins to relax. This activates the parasympathetic nervous system, sending a signal that says you don't need to be on right now. It doesn't mean there's not a problem. It means you don't have to be in survival mode to deal with the problem. I have another one on here called smoker's breath. I'm not suggesting you go smoke, but if you watch people smoke, I believe that a secondary gain to smoking other than nicotine is it's one of the few times people take deep breaths. If you watch somebody smoke, they do what I said in the beginning, take a deep breath in. They might even hold it for a minute and then they gently let it go. So I call this smoker's breath because go out and do that for 2 minutes like you're smoking a pack. So you could do it 20 times a day or even half a pack, 10 times a day. If you took breathing breaks like people or maybe you used to take smoke breaks, it'll begin to have a cumulative effect on your parasympathetic nervous system to allow you to build capacity and relax into discomfort so that when negative feelings come, you can still make choices based and actions based on where you want to go rather than out of reaction. So those are some simple tools you can use for yourself and you can pass on to your clients, your families. There's even kids yoga nidras on that website that are, kids ones are a little bit shorter, but they make them kind of fun. Lastly, before I open up for some questions, is energy follows attention. This is a principle in yoga. And what it means is what I'm focusing on expands. Where I'm looking is where my energy will go, not just physically looking, but where my attention is where my energy will follow. If I was driving a car on a flat road, I had my hands at 10 and 2, the road straight, the car's in alignment, the tires are in alignment, and I look off to the left, eventually the car will go there. In fact, in auto racing, there's a saying that says where the eyes go, the car goes. Same with us. If we're focusing only on the problem expands. Not in that the problem itself might expand, but our feelings, our relationship to the problem, the suffering that we're in around it will expand. And it makes it very difficult to manage the problem. I'm not suggesting go out and be Pollyanna and only see solution everywhere, but you've got to see both, right? It's like doing a balance sheet. You need assets and liabilities. You need problems and solutions. If you only look at your assets, you're going to think you're so rich and you're going to go out and be reckless in your spending because you haven't looked at what the liabilities are. If all you do is you look at your liabilities, you're going to think you're broke all the time and you don't have any money coming in if you don't see that, yes, I've got enough revenue coming in to cover it. It's simple to see from a financial perspective. It's the same with like problem and solution. Life is going to provide problems and solutions. How am I going to interact with them? I can't ignore them, but if all I do is focus on them, now the problem expands, right? There's the saying, pain is mandatory, suffering is optional. The suffering is my dislike of the problem. So notice where your attention is. Is my attention on the solution, neutral at the problem, or is my attention on all of the fear, anger, stress, all of that? You know, constantly be looking at that. Where is my energy? I mean, where is my attention? And when you can recalibrate and reorient your attention, you can come into alignment and your energy can flow better. And energy flowing better simply means I'm making decisions based on what actually is happening, not based on all of the perceptions and the fears and all of that that I have about what's happening. So notice where your attention is. And thank you today for having your attention here. I appreciate you being here. We have a few moments and I can stay on longer too. I would love to hear from a few of you. You can raise your hand. We'd love to hear from anything that you could use some more support on, anything that you want to share. We want to continue to provide some of these educational webinars, but also some opportunities for community connection. So which would be smaller meetings of like maybe 10 or 15 people where we can see each other all on the screen and really just connect. So please let us know. Right now, if you want, you can either put a question in the question box at the bottom, or you can, what would be even more helpful is if you raised your hand and let me know and I will call on you and you can ask a question out loud or share something. Pam Feinberg-Rifkin said, I'm very excited for community meetings. Thank you, Pam. So are we. Anybody, if you have anything that you'd like to ask or for me to expand on or just to share, just go ahead and raise your hand. Kimberly raised her hand. Go ahead, Kimberly. You have to unmute. Oh, I'll unmute you.
I'm just going to say I'm happy to coordinate the community meetings if the panel would like to pick a few time slots.
Okay, great. Thank you. I have, hold on one second. Kevin, I see your hand is raised. Hold on, I'm getting to you. Where are you on here? Kevin, if you can unmute yourself, I think you should be able to. Oh, there he is. There you go.
Hi. So I work with adolescents at a long-term residential treatment facility, and I imagine this question could be relevant in other contexts as well, but it's been challenging to engage the clients with the current situation without kind of bringing up something they don't bring to me. And there seems to be kind of a disconnect to how much it's having an impact on their lives. So I'm not sure how to not like project my anxieties and insecurities about what's going on outside of the workplace while still being able to kind of engage with them on a sort of larger than life issue right now. So I'm wondering if you have any tips about that.
Well, you know, I think that goes to, you know, you don't want to just stuff your own feelings and go to work and hold it all in. I think that's where a lot of the kind of self-care around recognizing what you can control, what you can't, you know, putting some things in practice that can allow you to, you know, when you need to be present with what's going on in the world, you can. And when you need to be present with those adolescents, you can, you know, and I think that's where being that field of resonance, I'm sure that they've got a lot of questions. I'm sure they've got things sometimes, you know, with these kids, it doesn't come up as, or kids or young adults, it doesn't come out directly. It might come out indirectly, but, you know, it's through some sort of play and being creative, you know, that's where when you can be in that, your own field of resonance, that's inviting that when they're ready to talk about it, or when it's time to, that they can. I think that's where you don't want to just, I see that with my, just my kids, well, not my baby, but the 12-year-old, he's not really connected to it. He wants to play his video games, and sometimes I want to say to him, and he's been, actually now that's great because he can play with those and be with his friends and talk to them. But, sometimes I want to say to him, how can you play that video game? There's people dying in the world, right? But that's not going to support him. I need to take care of that myself with my own, I'm still doing my own therapy and practices and things like that. And talking to my wife so that then, when I'm dealing with him, I can be present with him and still meet his needs in the middle of this. And I think that can translate also to working with those adolescent clients. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, absolutely. And if nothing else, it's a great experiential learning opportunity for dealing with countertransference.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, that's absolutely right. And that's important to look at where that countertransference is, right? I mean, and it's probably magnified right now at times, especially if you're stressed by something. At least for me, I know when I'm really stressed by something and I see somebody else not stressed, I started getting really stressed about this a few weeks ago, and I was trying to convince my wife that she should be stressed, which was probably not the best idea, right? And then she was just kind of like, well, we got to live our lives, we got to do this, and then they canceled school, and her stress level went through the roof because the kids are going to be home. But it was important to work through that, so I'm not imposing that on others. Thank you for your question. I hope that helps. We had a couple messages. Kristen said, thank you. Elise asked if I have a handout or graphic suggested for the breathing patterns. I can send out these slides, or somebody will, either Kimberly or somebody on the community relations team will send out the slides. Would that be helpful, Elise? I think you. Okay, great. And I'm going to put my email here. If you have any questions or concerns or thoughts or anything like that, or you want to ask me anything, I didn't send that to everybody. I will send it to everybody. You can please email me. I will get back to you. Any other shares, questions, comments, anything? Yeah, we may be sending out, thank you, Kevin. We may be sending out a survey asking for feedback or some other ideas. So please let us know. We really want to be at All Points North Lodge. We really want to be a conduit for community during this time. If anybody has any questions around the telehealth stuff or some of the meditations or anything like that, let me know. If you have any ideas on other ways you'd like to connect, please let us know. We're here to support you. Thank you very much for being here today. Please look out for some more, some upcoming events from us. Have a great day. As Lori said, be gentle with yourselves. Take care. Thank you. Oh, Kevin, did you have a question?
No, sorry, I was distracted by something else.
Okay. Thanks for being here today. Sorry about that. I hadn't lowered your hand yet. I still saw it up there. Have a good day.
Yeah, you too.
All right, bye-bye.